I wasn't snooping. Let me say that first. I wasn't the type of husband who dug through trash looking for lies. I believed in giving space, trusting her, staying in my lane. But that morning, I just happened to take out the bathroom garbage because the bag was bulging and it was my day off. That's all it was. But I saw it. Folded in half, stuck between a used tissue and a wax strip. A receipt. It was for a paternity test. Date: 3 weeks ago. Location: some lab in the next town over. Patient name: Juniper Holloway. My wife. There was a second page, half shredded, but I recognized the word instantly. Bold and merciless. Non-match. At first, I didn't even understand it. Like my brain refused to connect the dots. But I knew what I was looking at. I held that paper in my shaking hand while the coffee maker gurgled behind me. My knees buckled, and I sat on the floor, still in my boxers, staring at the paper like it was written in fire. 12 years. 2 kids. A life I thought was solid. Maybe not happy, maybe not passionate anymore, but stable, predictable, real. And now, in the space of seconds, I was nothing more than a man who had raised someone else's children. I didn't scream. I didn't call her. I didn't punch a wall or flip a table. I just sat there on the cold tile, letting the sound of the coffee drip into the pot fill the silence of my new reality. Later that day, I left the receipt in her underwear drawer, right on top of her favorite lace bralette, and didn't say a word. That night, she came home from her yoga class, like she always did, smelling like eucalyptus and lies. She didn't even glance at me. She just went to shower. 10 minutes later, I heard her drawer open, heard her feet stop. She never came out. She knew I knew. I stayed on the couch, eyes glued to the muted TV, watching a documentary about jellyfish like it was going to teach me how to breathe again. She never said a word. I never asked a question. And the next morning, I drove to the nearest motel and checked in under a fake name because I was too ashamed to be myself anymore. That was 4 days ago. I've eaten nothing but vending machine Oreos and orange soda since. And the worst part? I still miss tucking them in, even if they were never mine. I didn't leave the motel room for 2 days, not even to pretend I had somewhere to go. The curtains stayed shut like they were hiding me from the universe. The AC made a rattling noise that reminded me of the old crib we used to keep in the corner of our bedroom when Arla was a baby. I'd lie awake back then, listening to her little breaths, wondering how I got so lucky. Now I listen to that same sound while Googling how to test paternity at home without the mother knowing. Yeah, that's who I became. The kind of guy who sniffles into motel sheets while watching YouTube tutorials about collecting DNA off toothbrushes. I didn't even have a plan yet. I was still hoping this was some horrible misunderstanding, like maybe Juniper took the test behind my back because she had doubts and I was the one who'd been lied to. I clung to that fantasy like it owed me rent. But I knew better. I left the motel around 2 a.m. I couldn't risk being seen. I snuck back into the house like a thief, even though it was still legally mine. Juniper was asleep in the bedroom, alone. I didn't check her phone. I didn't look at her. I went straight to the bathroom and quietly took the kids' toothbrushes, 2 hairbrushes, and a dirty t-shirt from the laundry basket. My hands were trembling the whole time, like I was robbing a bank. I remember standing in the hallway in the dark, staring at their closed doors. Wes had taped a crooked Minecraft poster on his door. Arla had glitter letters that spelled "No Boys Allowed." They were my world. They called me Dad. And now, I wasn't even sure I deserved the title. The DNA kit arrived 2 days later. I shipped it the next morning, barely keeping my hands steady enough to seal the box. The waiting was a special kind of torment. Every hour stretched out like it was mocking me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I watched old home videos on my phone until I had a migraine. I kept looking at Wes's laugh. Was it mine? Was any of it mine? Then the results came. I didn't even read the full email, just the bolded section near the top. Probability of paternity, 0%. Twice. Both kids. I dropped the phone in the sink and just stood there, staring at my reflection in the motel mirror, water running, phone buzzing with the final page of the report, but I couldn't move. I didn't scream, didn't punch the wall. I whispered, of course, like I'd known all along. Like my whole life had been a bedtime story told to a child stupid enough to believe it. And then I did something pathetic. I texted her. How long? 3 minutes later, she responded with 2 words. You deserve this. That was the moment something snapped. Not the kind of snap where you take revenge or break the law. No, I'm not built like that. I'm the kind of man who apologizes when someone bumps into him. But something inside me collapsed like a tired lung. Something that wasn't ever going to reinflate. And I knew I couldn't go back. Not ever. The thing they don't tell you about grief is how stupid it makes you. I had no plan. No endgame. Just this crushing need to see them again. Not Juniper. Not her smug silence or cruel texts. Just the kids. I hadn't seen Wes or Arla in over a week, and I'd memorized every second of every video I had saved on my phone. I knew their laughs, their voices, the way they mispronounced things. But it wasn't enough. I needed real. I needed air in my lungs again, even if it hurt. So I did what any emotionally imploding idiot would do. I sat in my car outside their school in a baseball cap and sunglasses, hoping no one would recognize the loser dad hiding behind a steering wheel. I waited through the mind-numbing stretch of the school day, watching kids come and go, backpacks bouncing, bells ringing, teachers on walkie-talkies. It felt surreal, like I didn't belong on the planet anymore, let alone in a school zone. Then the bell rang, and I saw them. Wes came out first. He was taller than I remembered, already getting that awkward preteen slouch in his shoulders, like the world was heavier on him than it should be. He was with two friends, kicking at a can, laughing at something one of them said. For a second, I smiled. Just instinct. That was my boy? No, not my boy. But he turned suddenly, like he felt me watching. His eyes scanned the street, locked on my car for half a second, and I swear to God, his whole face changed. I don't know how, but in that half second, I felt it. He knew. Something in his eyes wasn't right. It wasn't confusion or surprise. It was guilt. Or fear. Or maybe it was just my own guilt hallucinating through tinted glass. I slid down in my seat like a coward. Then Arla came out, skipping, spinning her lunchbox like she didn't have a care in the world. She still wore those ridiculous neon socks she loved, the ones I always told her didn't match anything. She didn't even glance my way. She looked happy, bright, whole. I wanted to open the door, run across the street, and hug them until my arms went numb. But I didn't move. Instead, I just sat there as they disappeared down the sidewalk with their mother, who had arrived in that same silver car the other man drove. Only this time, she was in the passenger seat. The man was back. He got out, opened the back door, ruffled Wes's hair, kissed Juniper on the cheek. They all laughed. Like a family. My family. Or whatever twisted version of it still existed. And right then, I don't know how else to say this, I felt erased. Like someone had pressed backspace on my existence. I had been a father, a husband, a provider, a joke. Now I was just noise. Background static. Some guy who used to live in the house, but doesn't get mentioned anymore. I sat there until dusk, until the school lot was empty, until even the birds had stopped singing. I felt disgusting, but I also felt suspicious. Why did Wes look at me that way? Why did he seem scared? I opened the notes app on my phone and wrote something I hadn't expected to type. What if Juniper told them I was dangerous? And the moment I wrote it, I couldn't unthink it. Something was off. This wasn't just betrayal. It was manipulation. There was something more. And I was going to find out. I wish I could say I started digging out of strength. That I wanted justice. That I was brave. But the truth is, I started looking because I had nothing left to lose. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't even listen to music. Every lyric felt like it was mocking me. I needed answers, not closure. Closure is for people who had something real to begin with. I was starting to suspect I never did. It began with a login. I still had access to our shared online banking, something she must have forgotten or assumed I wouldn't be pathetic enough to check. Wrong. I was that pathetic. That broken. That obsessed. I waited until 2 a.m. in my motel room, then opened the laptop like I was lifting a coffin lid. The first thing that hit me was how little I understood the woman I married. There were recurring transfers I didn't recognize, to a checking account at a completely different bank. Small amounts at first, $50, $75, then larger ones, $400, $1,000, regular, predictable, going back years. The earliest one, 3 months before our wedding. 3 months before we said, I do. She started siphoning money into a private account. I remember because that was when she told me she'd paid off her student loans. Said it was a personal milestone and didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She made me feel guilty for offering to celebrate. Now I knew why. I started tracking the dates, cross-referencing them with what was happening in our lives. Our honeymoon, Arla's birth. That year I lost my job, and we had to borrow money from my parents. All those times she told me we were broke. All those nights I sat at the kitchen table figuring out how to stretch $50 into a week's worth of groceries. She was funneling cash out, bit by bit, like a slow bleed. And then I saw something worse. Payments labeled as consulting fees to a man named L. Beckett. Recurring. Going back 9 years. I'd never heard that name in my life. So I looked him up. It took less than a minute to find his LinkedIn profile. Real estate investor. Financial consultant. Lives 2 towns over. His photo hit me like a shovel to the chest. Same man from the school pickup. Same silver car. He wasn't new. He was never new. And he wasn't a consultant. He was on her payroll. 9 years. She'd been paying him. For what? I didn't know. But it wasn't business. Nobody hides business from their husband for nearly a decade. And this is when my stomach truly turned. I opened another tab and searched our mortgage records. Public info. Easy to find. I had signed every paper when we bought that house, or so I thought. But the deed? It was in her name only. Always had been. I was never listed. I was never on the house. My signature was nowhere. 12 years living in that house, fixing broken pipes, mowing the lawn, repainting walls, building IKEA bunk beds, hosting birthday parties and barbecues, and legally, I was no more entitled to it than the mailman. And you know what the worst part is? I started wondering if the kids were even an accident. If I was chosen, positioned, used, like a human smokescreen while she lived a second life in the shadows. Like none of it was ever mine. Not the house, not the kids, not the marriage. And I still didn't have the courage to confront her. Not yet. Because somewhere, deep in my pathetic excuse of a soul, I was still hoping for an explanation that would make it all okay. That hope was the last piece of me she hadn't killed. But it wouldn't survive much longer. I had no idea what I was doing. No plan. No script. Just a name, a face, and a quiet rage that had been simmering so long it didn't feel like fire anymore. It felt like ice. Sharp. Cold. I punched the address into my phone with shaking fingers and drove across town in silence. No music. No radio. Just the sound of my tires chewing through pavement and the blood pounding behind my eyes. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some rundown bachelor pad or a slick, soulless condo. What I didn't expect was a quiet house on a hill, trimmed hedges, kids' bikes on the lawn, a mailbox with his name neatly printed on the side. L. Beckett. He had a family. Of course he did. I almost turned around right then, humiliated by how stupid this all was. But I didn't. I parked down the street, waited until the lights inside dimmed, then walked up the driveway like I belonged there. Like I had some kind of right to be on his property. When he opened the door, I nearly forgot how to speak. He was calm. Too calm. Not surprised. Not startled. Not defensive. Just stood there barefoot in slacks and a t-shirt, holding a whiskey glass, one eyebrow raised like he'd been expecting me all week. "Clint," he said, voice low and even. I figured this was coming. I stood frozen. That one sentence sent something crawling up my spine. I hadn't introduced myself. Hadn't said a word. But he knew. He knew me. Not just who I was. He knew I'd come. He'd been waiting. "Don't worry," he added, stepping aside. "My wife's out of town. Kids are asleep. You want to sit down?" I should have walked away. Should have called a lawyer. Should have gone anywhere else. But I didn't. I followed him into that house like a moth into a bonfire. It was perfect in the way hotels are perfect. Minimalist. Cold. Expensive furniture that looked untouched. No family photos. No warmth. Just the smell of money and silence. He poured himself another drink, offered me one. I said nothing. He sat down in a chair across from the couch and leaned back like we were old friends catching up. "She didn't want you to know," he finally said. "Know what?" I croaked, my voice weaker than I wanted. "That you were the decoy." The word didn't land at first. It just hung in the air, harmless and ridiculous, until it started to make sense in the most horrifying way. "She picked you on purpose," he continued. "Back when she was still, let's call it cleaning up her life. She needed stability, an image, a fallback. And there you were, the nice guy. Soft, predictable, perfect." My throat went dry. I tried to speak, to interrupt, to tell him he was full of it, but he wasn't done. I helped her get the mortgage, helped her set up the account transfers. She needed someone to build the stage while we ran the show. He said it so casually, like I wasn't a person, like I was a strategy, and suddenly it all fit. The money, the property, the distance. The timing of her pregnancies. The fake smiles. The short leash of affection, always just enough to keep me from questioning too much. I wasn't even a husband. I was camouflage. Why? I finally managed to whisper. Why the kids? That was when he looked away for the first time, just briefly, and I saw a flicker of something. Regret? Doubt? Guilt? I couldn't tell. But it was gone in an instant. That part wasn't supposed to happen. At least, not like it did. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. Because deep down, I already did. I'm not going to fight you, he said, standing up. I'm not here to justify anything. You deserve better. You just weren't part of the plan anymore. I left without another word. I don't remember the drive home. I don't even remember starting the car. I just remember lying face down on the motel carpet, fully clothed, whispering their names into the floor like it could rewind time. Wes. Arla. Wes. Arla. Over and over. Because even if they weren't mine, they were the only thing that ever felt real. I stared at the ceiling for 3 hours straight that night, wide-eyed and motionless. Not crying, not spiraling, just still. Empty. My mind wasn't racing. It had gone completely quiet, like all the machinery had finally burned out. I don't even remember falling asleep. I just remember waking up around 4:20 a.m. to the sound of my motel mini fridge humming like it was trying to speak Morse code. And that was when something finally snapped in me. I opened my laptop and started digging. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even looking for answers at that point. I was looking for proof that the woman I married had ever existed. Because I couldn't shake the thought that had burrowed into my mind like a parasite after the conversation with Beckett. She picked you. You can't pick someone without a plan. You can't plan without a past. So I searched. Court records. Property histories. Old social accounts. Public directories. I even accessed an old subscription to a people search service I used once years ago to track down a college buddy. I typed her full name. Juniper Alice Holloway. The first hit was our marriage license. Standard. Normal. Filed in our state in 2011. But that was it. Nothing before that. No school records. No employment history. No credit history earlier than 2010. It was like she didn't exist before the year we met. I stared at the blank search results, my stomach twisting itself into a knot. Everyone has something. A yearbook, a property cosign, an old phone bill. But Juniper? She appeared in 2010 like a ghost crawling out of fog. Then I tried something else. I entered our old email. The one she used before we got married, which we kept for Amazon orders and travel confirmations. Most of it was junk, newsletters, flight itineraries, shopping receipts, until I found a confirmation email from an ancestry site. I clicked it. She'd done a DNA test. Years ago. I clicked the view profile link, and to my shock, it was still active. Public. Barely filled in. No photos, no family tree. But her name wasn't listed as Juniper. It was Margot Lane. I froze. I typed that name into the search engine and felt my breath catch. Dozens of results. College yearbooks. A bankruptcy filing. A photo in an old local newspaper from some small town 2 states away. She was in the background, barely visible, standing beside a man who was listed as missing just 1 year later. I kept going. Margot Lane had vanished in 2009 after being questioned in connection with a man's disappearance. Never charged. Never arrested. Just gone. Reappeared a year later as Juniper Holloway. My wife. I felt like the ground under me had turned to glass. Thin, cracking, hollow. Who the hell had I married? All those moments, the ones I had buried, ignored, rationalized, they all started coming back like rot bubbling to the surface. Her refusal to talk about her childhood. The way she never brought up family. The weird aliases on packages that would sometimes show up and she'd laugh it off like, oh, just old college prank stuff. The nights she disappeared without explanation and came back with that perfect, manufactured smile. I thought she was hiding affairs. She was hiding herself. Suddenly, the betrayal wasn't just personal. It wasn't even romantic. It was existential. I had built a life with someone who didn't exist. Not legally, not emotionally, not truthfully. She'd created a persona, wrapped me in it, filled it with fake kids, fake love, fake security. And I gave her everything. I typed one last query into the search bar. Margot Lane disappearance suspect, 2010 affidavit. One result. My hands trembled as I clicked it. The document was short, just a paragraph, but it was enough. Police found inconsistencies in her timeline, fabricated emails, and a forged signature on a financial release form in the name of the missing man. Charges were never filed due to lack of evidence. But the name of the man? Lucas Beckett. My jaw went slack. She had known him since before me. Before everything. This wasn't some sleazy affair or slow unraveling of a bored marriage. This was a long con. A network. A structure. A coordinated scheme that had been moving long before I entered the picture. I wasn't collateral damage. I was a stage prop in a show that had been running for over a decade. And suddenly, I knew. She wasn't going to let me walk away clean. Because people like me don't walk away at all. It started with the reflection in the vending machine glass. I had gone outside at 3:47 in the morning for a soda. Not because I needed caffeine, but because I needed to hear a sound that wasn't inside my own head. The hallway was empty. The parking lot, darker than usual. The buzzing fluorescent light above the machine flickered, humming a dull static that made my skin crawl. I bent down to grab the can from the slot, and when I stood back up, I saw him. In the reflection, a figure, hoodie, black, standing across the street. Still, I turned around, heart thudding in my chest, but the lot was empty. Silent. Only a few cars. Nothing unusual. I stood there for another full minute before going back inside. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Just sat on the edge of the bed, every light on, holding the soda like it was a weapon. I kept checking the peephole. Nothing. Dead silence. At 6:03 a.m., I finally opened the door. There was a folded piece of paper on the floor, right in front of my room. No envelope. No tape. Just a single sheet of printer paper with one line typed in the center. Stop digging. That was it. No signature. No name. No threat. But it didn't need one. Because someone had been inside. Or close enough. The hallway has no cameras. The front desk clerk was asleep at the counter. Anyone could have slipped in unnoticed. But someone had known exactly where I was. Exactly what I was doing. I checked out within 15 minutes, grabbed everything I could, and drove. Nowhere in particular. Just away. I kept switching lanes. Taking side streets. Checking my rearview mirror every 30 seconds like I was in a spy movie. Except I wasn't a spy. I was a broken man in a Nissan with a cracked windshield and a duffel bag full of anxiety. Around 11 a.m., I pulled into a cheap diner off the interstate. One of those forgotten places with cracked leather booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the Bush administration. I sat in the back, ordered nothing, and pulled out my laptop. I created a burner email and sent one message to the only person I thought might know something I didn't. Subject: what did she promise you? 2. Beckett Consults at Proton Mail. Calm. I know about Margot. I know about the man from 2009. I know she forged the mortgage. I know you've been helping her erase me. But I don't know one thing. What did she promise you in the end? See, I didn't expect a reply. But 5 minutes later, one came. Subject: you don't get it. It was never about me. It was always about you. Don't you get it? She didn't pick you by accident. She picked you because of your father. I stared at the screen for a full minute, hands frozen, throat tightening. My father? What did any of this have to do with him? He died when I was 16. A heart attack. Blue-collar worker. Never left the state. Never got in trouble. Just a tired man with a good work ethic and a bad diet. He'd never met Juniper. Never heard her name. How could he be involved? I replied, typing fast. What are you talking about? My father? What does he have to do with any of this? This time, it took longer. 15 minutes. 20. My fingers kept hovering over the keyboard like maybe the act of typing again would force the universe to give me answers. Finally, the reply came. But it wasn't from Beckett. It was from a different address entirely. Subject: there are things you're not supposed to know. Stop. No more emails. No more questions. This goes deeper than her. The next time someone knocks, don't answer. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity, or emotional ruin, or lies about children. This was architecture. And I was standing in the center of a structure I was never meant to see from the outside. I drove for hours. Maybe days. The highway blurred into small towns. The towns blurred into dirt roads. At some point, I threw my phone out the window, not because I thought it would save me, but because I didn't want to know who would be calling next. I didn't want to wake up to another email warning me to stay quiet. I didn't want to be watched, followed, used. I just wanted to feel real again. I found the cabin by accident. It wasn't listed anywhere. No GPS tag. Just a small, rotting structure with a for sale sign half swallowed by the grass. The front porch was caved in. The chimney looked like it hadn't breathed smoke in decades. But when I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Stillness. Not silence. Stillness. No buzzing. No digital noise. No eyes on me. Just wind in the trees and dust in the air. I paid cash to a local agent who didn't ask questions. Signed under a fake name. Bought tools. Cut wood. Built walls with my hands until they stopped shaking. The cabin had no Wi-Fi. No cameras. No mail. Just a small stove, a battered mattress, and a window that faced the sunrise. I spent the first few weeks in silence. Eating simple meals. Writing in notebooks. Every morning, I'd take a walk through the woods and whisper their names. Wes. Arla. Every time, it hurt a little less. They didn't know the truth. That wasn't their fault. They had a life now. A new version of reality. One Juniper had manufactured so carefully that even I had believed it. I couldn't rip that from them just to feel seen. So I let them go. But I didn't erase them. I wrote them letters. One for each birthday. One for every first day of school I would miss. I kept them in a box beside my bed. Someday, maybe, someone will deliver them. Or maybe not. Maybe they'll stay here forever, buried beneath the life I never got to live. But at least I'll know I said what I needed to say. I started growing vegetables. Fixed the plumbing. Found peace in chopping firewood, in boiling water for tea, in reading paperbacks I'd never had time for. The world outside kept spinning. I saw glimpses of it when I went into town for supplies. But it didn't belong to me anymore. And strangely, that was okay. And then, something strange happened. Peace became purpose. I began journaling everything. Not just the betrayal, but the patterns, the tactics, the manipulation. I studied it like a blueprint. If she could pick me because of my father, I had to find out why. Not for revenge, for understanding. And when I was ready, I wrote something new. Not a letter to my kids, but a story. A real one. One that didn't end in silence or fear. A story about a man who survived being erased and built something honest with what was left. I published it anonymously. It went viral. People wrote to the P.O. box I listed. Survivors. Whistleblowers. Lonely men who thought they were crazy. Women who'd been used in the same way. People who'd been chosen for the worst reasons and left behind like shadows. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. The ending wasn't explosive. It wasn't revenge or closure. It was clarity. I lost my home, my name, my family, and the life I thought I was building. But I found truth. I found peace. I found a version of myself that wasn't built to please or prove, just to exist, to breathe, to be. The cabin still creaks in the wind. The stove still whistles when the kettle boils. And every morning, I still whisper two names to the trees, not in grief, but in love. Wes. Arla. You were never mine, but I was always yours.